Senator Merkley.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dourson, chlorpyrifos is a pesticide that's widely used. You find it on a lot of the produce in the fresh vegetable aisle of the grocery store. A lot of that produce has been sprayed with this. Simple yes or no, has chlorpyrifos been linked to brain damage in children?
Although it would be inappropriate for me to prejudge an issue within U.S. EPA, since there's some staff deliberations I'm not privy to. If confirmed, I'll ensure that the issue is fully and fairly
You have no knowledge about the studies that have been done on this insecticide?
No, I'm knowledgeable of the studies.
Has it been linked to brain cancer in peer-reviewed studies?
I'm aware of the studies.
Brain damage? Has it been linked in these studies? What are the studies? Can you
it
answer
been
yes or
linked?
no? Has it been linked to brain damage in children in peer-reviewed studies?
There are peer-reviewed epidemiology studies that show an association in one
Mr.
study
Chairman.
and not others.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record the following peer-reviewed study showing that chlorpyrifos is linked to brain damage in children. You have been paid
Without objection.
You have been paid to assess the safety of this chemical. Who paid you or Tara to assess the safety of this chemical?
In 2006 and 2005, we did 2 manuscripts.
Just who paid you? That's the question.
Okay, it was Dow AgroSciences.
Thank you. So my understanding of your organization is that their work, you ultimately recommended a safe level of 10 micrograms per kilogram per day. That standard is quite different from the EPA floor for safety for children ages 1 to 2 of 0.0017 micrograms per kilogram per day. In fact, the safety level you proposed in your study, paid for by Dow Chemical, the very same company that makes this chemical, is 5,822 times less protective than the level proposed by the EPA. I'd like to turn to alachlor and acetochlor, 2 herbicides that are widely used. Simple yes or no, have they been linked to cancer?
We did the study for a collection of industries.
Have they been linked? This is a yes or no question. Your knowledge, your background, your life's work, are you aware of these studies linking
I'm
this
aware
chemicals
of
to
studies
cancer?
with neurological disturbances with acetylchlorine.
But not cancer.
I'm not so sure I recall those data.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record the following peer-reviewed study linking alachlor and acetochlor to cancer.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dourson, I understand you've been paid to assess the safety of both of these chemicals. Therefore, your familiarity with them, I anticipated, would be significantly more. What organization paid you to assess the safety of these 2 chemicals? Just a name, please.
Dow AgroSciences, and we also had for Monsanto, I believe. Both of them contributed to a collaborative project that included a group of people that, including government scientists, that helped with
Thank
the
you. That is my understanding, those 2 companies.
Right.
Your organization ultimately recommended reference dose for the degradates or breakdown products that would translate to a safety level of 5,600 parts per billion. That is significantly weaker standard than standard set by the state of Wisconsin of 20 parts per billion, of Minnesota at 60 parts per billion. In fact, the safety standard proposed is 280 times weaker than the standard set by Wisconsin and 70 times weaker than that of Minnesota. And the same trend is true for acetochlor. Your standards were 5 to 15 times weaker than the standards set by Minnesota. This is a disturbing pattern for someone charged with representing the safety of our citizens from these chemicals. Mr. Chairman, I'd like unanimous consent to submit for the record a letter from a wide range of worker advocacy organizations, including many farm worker advocacy organizations.
Without objection.
Thank you. This letter states, and I quote, "The nomination of Mr. Dourson to be in charge of chemical safety of the EPA is a threat to our nation's children, farm workers, and communities at the front lines of exposure to chlorpyrifos." Flame retardants are chemicals that are used in everything from car seats to couches. EPA has placed many of these chemicals on its list of chemicals it wishes to examine first under TSCA. 10 years ago, the biggest companies that made these chemicals formed and organization Citizens for Fire Safety to promote their use. In 2012, the group was found to have paid doctors to testify against proposed legislation to ban the chemicals. These doctors described heartbreaking stories about burned children who died in the arms but might have been saved if only flame retardants had been used on their burning sheets and pillowcases. Just one problem: those children did not exist. These stories were fabricated. Citizens for Fire Safety folded in 2012, right after this shameful scam was exposed. And I note this because the very same flame retardant manufacturers that backed Citizens for Fire Safety then announced they would continue their advocacy efforts through the North American Flame Retardant Alliance, which is part of the American Chemistry Council. That alliance consistently promotes the use of flame retardants, downplays their risk to health, lobbies against proposals to regulate them. Mr. Dourson, according to documents you provided the committee, you were a member of the North American Flame Retardant Alliance Scientific Advisory Council from early 2012 till just a couple months ago. You list being paid $10,000 in consulting fees. You have led research funded by the same flame retardant companies that were backing the Citizens for Fire Safety and the Alliance. Having taken this employment, this advocacy, it's simply hard to conclude how you could be an objective and impartial regulator when it comes to these flame retardants. If confirmed, do you commit to recuse yourself from working on any chemical safety matter related to flame retardants?
Senator, Tara and the University of Cincinnati has worked with a number of organizations for flame retardants, including Consumer Product Safety Commission, Health Canada, the National
That is
Academy
not
of
the question I'm asking. I'm asking if you
Senator,
recuse
your
yourself.
time has expired.
That's a simple yes or no question.
And there's a second
And
round.
US
We will have
EPA.
plenty of time for a second round of questions.
Yes,
Just ask
yes
all
or
the
no,
members
Mr. Dourson?
to keep this
Can you
to
answer
their
the question?
5-minute rounds so
Will
that
you
we can have.
recuse? Well, we'd be done if you'd answer the question, Mr. Chairman. It's simple yes or no question.
I will rely on the guidance from EPA ethics
That's
officials
not sufficient. Thank
to
you.
determine any issues.
Thank
for
you.
which
We'll
I
have
am
time for a
free to
second round.